Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Brittany Sullivan with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we will turn the floor over to our esteemed keynote speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Monica Panetta, Human Resources Officer at LifeScan. We're excited to have Monica with us for her keynote titled HR versus the Quiet Quitting Phenomenon. Welcome, Monica, and over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Hi, everybody. As Brittany said, I'm Monica. I work at LifeScan. We are the maker of the One Touch diabetes products based out of Pennsylvania. I've been at LifeScan for a little over 4 years, and I've been working in the HR field for close to 20 years. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about one of HR's biggest buzzwords, quiet quitting. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to take you back in time, what seems like a very long time ago, but really only 4 years ago, to 2019. And we can call this the calm before the storm, the last year of normalcy, whatever you'd like to call it, pre-pandemic, when commutes were a thing and Zoom was only used when a meeting room wasn't available in the office. So let's go back in time. So this is me in 2019. Hardly ancient history, but my mid 30-year-old self waking up at 5 a.m. to get a quick workout in before having to get myself ready, check emails to see what came in overnight, get 2 kids ready so my parents could put them on the bus to school, get the dog taken care of, and all of this before 6:45 a.m. when my day actually started. Then I'd get in the car, take my 20-minute commute, and have my workday actually begin. Put in 100% in the office, and then worry about wrapping up in time to do the commute and to be home in time for dinner, homework, sports practice, all the other great things that we would have after our workday. And those days I was, very tired. And I remember thinking at one point, I don't know how sustainable this is to do all of these things always at 100%. I'm the type of person that likes to go above and beyond in everything. So it's really hard to do that when you're doing multiple things at 110%. And right as I was starting to think that was getting to be not sustainable, the pandemic hit and everything kind of stopped. And working from home took off, changed the world for a lot of professions, including mine. In a post-COVID world, working at home has become so much more acceptable and even almost a default. 4 years ago, most of us would have celebrated the situation graciously to say, I don't need to do my commute. I don't have to, leave work at a half day to take a doctor's appointment. And are we all thankful for that? Of course we are. But if not done correctly, and if not some things not being put in place correctly, this is a large reason why this topic was chosen as a keynote. But not here to talk about me. The real subject is quiet quitting. Why does it happen? What can we do about it? What are some things that you can actually take away from this today and incorporate into your day-to-day with your teams to try to help combat this? Well, my story just leads into some of those things, but we're going to be talking about that over the next couple minutes here. So let's get right into it. What is quiet quitting? So what's the definition of this buzzword that we've all been hearing so much about? So quiet quitting is actually talking about doing the tasks of your job and basically no more, no less. And also including some factors of disengagement as well. So I'm not talking about, putting boundaries up. I'm not talking about making sure that you have, your day planned out. I'm talking about purposefully kind of not putting in 100% or 100 and over 100% of your effort into your job. So that's really what quiet quitting means. And we rely on a good part of our workforce to go above and beyond. So having this quiet quitting phenomenon has really changed the dynamic of the workplace, as we'll talk more about here. But essentially, this has done a lot of things to the workforce. One, it's frustrated a lot of people who have not quiet quit. It's also put some strain on our talent planning processes, because we used to have this really great robust pipeline of future talent that was really motivated and engaged, and that's become more of a challenge as we've seen quiet quitting on the rise. What I would say is a more startling piece is that 28% of HR professionals have actually witnessed quiet quitting in frontline management. So the people who are supposed to be motivating employees and ensuring engagement are not engaged themselves. So that's where we'll focus a lot of our attention here as we go through. But let's talk a little bit about why quiet quitting is happening next. These are the reasons why we are seeing this quiet quitting phenomenon happen. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about each one. They probably will not come as a surprise to you, but this is really what we need to kind of address. And I'll also show you in the next slide why people are quitting, not quiet quitting, but actually quitting. And you'll see that there's a lot of similarities. So first one, of course, another hot topic, wages, inflation, how hot our labor market is. So, people are becoming less motivated because their wages aren't keeping up with market. Things are more expensive. The cost of everything is rising. And when we don't keep up with that, people become unmotivated really, really quickly. They work really hard, and to have to worry about keeping up with, their electric bills and things like that. People have other options now with the job market the way it is. So that's one really big reason. Most recently, I'm sure as you've all logged onto LinkedIn and, Facebook and looking at all this social media, layoffs are everywhere, news of layoffs, threats of layoffs. So this is another one that is kind of putting this quiet quitting phenomenon out there. People are uncertain. So they're not sure if they're going to have a job. And of course, if you can find a new job before you lose yours, that's always the preference. And there are jobs, lots of opportunities everywhere right now. So that is one other key thing. Unreasonable expectations outside of business hours or boundaries. And we'll talk a little bit more about this too, but people have really, gotten into the flexible work swing of things and don't feel like they necessarily have to or want to work outside of office hours or reasonable hours anymore at this stage in the game. So a lot of people are seeking out those opportunities that require them to work, very standard hours and allow them to still have life outside of work. Also limited opportunities for raises and promotions. This also comes with economy kind of squeezing. We have companies who are kind of putting a freeze on that or limiting those for people because of financial constraints. So when people see limited opportunities for those types of things to progress, they're going to go look for them elsewhere. And generally speaking, when people are leaving to go to new companies, we're seeing an average of 10 to 30% raises for people landing those new roles, which leads into the next reason, new employees getting paid more than existing employees. So the wages are driving up this demand. And as we hire new people in, people who are in seat already are being left behind because these newer employees are demanding higher wages. So that also creates some dissatisfaction and disengagement. Another big one, relationship with manager. So making sure that you've got that really close relationship where you can be really open and transparent, that is waning. And most likely because, as you saw on the slide before, that we're seeing quiet quitting happening with frontline management. So when you have managers who are not engaged and who are also not putting in, their full capacity, that trickles down to their team. So those relationships are also being strained right now in this current climate. And we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to help that as we go through the presentation today. And then the last one here, and I'm sure that there's many more, but culture. So negative opinion of company culture. You can find out about company culture pretty much anywhere. It's all out there. Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Facebook, phone a friend. You can find out what people think of the company before you join it and the company that you're at currently. So, people want to be at a place that other people want to be at. They want to be at a happy place where they feel like people are valued and that culture is thriving. So that's another reason why people are seeking, other opportunities or are just quitting in chair and having the quiet quitting happening. So as you can see, there's a lot of reasons. I'm sure there's others, and I challenge you, if you can think of other reasons or you've seen other reasons, put them in the chat. I'd love to see your answers and see if there's anything else that you're spotting that we can talk through. So stick those in the chat and we'll get to them when we get to the Q&A section so we can have some discussion about them. So now let's take a little bit of a look at why people are actually quitting. So this is a really interesting comparison because a lot of these things were on the slide in the past. So you can see reasons for quiet quitting are also reasons for actual quitting. So if we don't address them at the quiet quitting stage, then you've got people who are actually leaving the company and seeking other opportunities. So of course, lack of career advancement, which we talked about, and inadequate compensation, which we also talked about. The other one, uncaring, uninspiring leaders. So again, that all kind of funnels back to those people manager levels being, feeling like they have a seat, feeling like they are engaged and inspired as well, so that they can make their teams feel that way. So we've got a lot of different ways that we can help with that as we go through this today, and you'll see some things that we've actually done at LifeScan to help with that. Lack of meaningful work is another one. So if people don't feel like their work is making a difference, that is a really big reason why people go to another company and leave the role. Unsustainable work expectations, just like we said in the last slide, right? The boundaries, the outside of work, more work than you can handle in a day. And, that's all driving to have people looking for other opportunities. And this one actually was interesting, but kind of falls into this quiet quitting phenomenon. So unreliable and unsupportive work colleagues. So one of the interesting things about this is that having, unreliable and unsupportive work colleagues could also mean that they're working with some people who have quiet quit. So unreliable, just doing the bare minimum, not going above and beyond, not caring about the outcome. All of these things are so interconnected with quiet quitting, but also quitting in general, and people leaving their work opportunities for new ones and seeking that out elsewhere. And I'm seeing some things come through the chat. No upskilling opportunities, that's another really big one. Lack of togetherness, of course, with the remote work being so much more the norm now, it's really hard to have that togetherness when you're just seeing each other on Zoom. And we really have to put extra effort in to master that and make people feel like they have that culture and that togetherness when they're not actually together. So yes, those are all really also great reasons that we see for quiet quitting. So I also just wanted to show, these things here are reasons why people are leaving. And this chart here is just showing how people have become, disengaged, or what our disengagement factor kind of looks like on a chart. And you can see very clearly post-pandemic disengagement has been on the rise. Obviously still have a way to go from the 2006 to 2008 era, but slowly making an uptick. It's not going down. So unless we can do some things now to try and help change this trend, we're not going to see it go down anytime soon. So I'm hoping that talking through this and maybe some of these things you can take back to kind of try to help sway this a little bit. But this is a really big, trend that we're seeing, and an uptick in disengagement. So one of the things I think that we really have to talk through as well is, there's this whole other thought process of quiet quitting, isn't really happening. It's actually just boundary setting. And, there's an important distinction here. So people who assert their boundaries are not quiet quitters. So I just want to make sure that we understand that. Boundaries are a perfectly healthy thing to have, and everyone should have a healthy set of boundaries. But it's when that turns into disengagement, and when that turns into, just doing the very bare minimum, that's when we have a quiet quit scenario, not when people are saying, hey, I can't take calls after 5, or I can't take calls, before 8. That's not quiet quitting. That's asserting healthy boundaries, which we want, because if we don't have that, that is a reason why people will quiet quit, because they feel like they can't assert those appropriately and that their workplace is not embracing those. So that's a really important distinction. And communication is another one. So making sure that we set clear expectations up front with our teams about what healthy boundaries look like and what our work life looks like is super critical. Because if people don't know that, then, they can run into this psychological safety place where they think, they're missing out on something. They have to log on at 8 o'clock and check their emails, or they have to, get that one last check-in at 10 p.m. and make sure nothing's happening tomorrow at 8 a.m. So we just, as leaders, have to really help our people make those boundaries in a healthy way. The other thing that I would say on the boundaries topic, there's been more than 4 million people a month that have left their roles in 2022. 48% of those people have pursued opportunities in new fields. So getting so, tired of not having the boundaries, getting burnt out, caused them to want to switch industries or careers completely. So we're not going to be able to make some changes in this unless we actually do some meaningful actions to try to help. And, going into what we can do about it, I think these things are something that everyone should commit to, at least one of them, and try and put an action plan around for 2023. So our first one, talking openly. So making sure that our people leaders are really talking with their teams and not just having one-on-ones and going through the daily, what's new, what's on fire conversation, but having a really meaningful conversation with them, coming up with a series of questions to ask their teams so that they can gauge engagement and, ask for suggestions for improvement. So making sure that they've got input in how that works. The surveys are great, but I think they should supplement the actual one-on-one discussions and the, live discussions, because you only, the surveys are only so good. People are sometimes more comfortable talking in a confidential way, but I think having those relationships and working through that relationship is more important than, gathering survey data. Setting clear goals and objectives for the year and talking through them consistently. That's another really big thing, making sure that expectations are set, creating that culture of openness with your teams and a human experience, understanding that, hey, look, we know things happen, we're going to be flexible, but here's the output and expectations that we have of you in your role to be considered, sufficient and progression and making sure that we have progress in what we're trying to accomplish. So I think those are all really important things. Also, monthly education. So one of the things that we do at LifeScan is we have monthly manager meetings where we take all of our people leaders cross-functionally and we meet with them about certain things, whether it's a training topic or talking about a new business initiative, but basically pulling your people leaders together. Again, that group of people who we looked at, we're seeing the most quiet quitting in, and putting some training together for them. You know, what does it look like to engage your team? You know, how can we help them with the tools that they need to do that? Some managers just don't know how. So we need to really give them the education and the support to be able to do that so that they can help with navigating their teams as well. Reviewing your compensation processes and philosophies. This is a big one. You know, making sure you have a way, a mechanism to look at pay. So if you do have people coming in with less experience at a higher salary, you know, making sure you have a mechanism to review the pay of the people who have been here, been in the chair and have, you know, more experience. And that doesn't mean you always have to pay them more, but just having a process and a philosophy on how you do it and communicating that is, you know, something that will kind of keep your employees at a good, you know, understanding that you're being transparent with them, especially as we have more compensation transparency mandates over the coming months and in 23. And also, one other thing that I think is really important, we all have increases in workload. You know, somebody leaves on our team, we have to temporarily step in, but keeping those increases in work short term, unless you're actually going to promote the person and give them that extra work. But if it's temporary, make sure it's temporary. You know, we shouldn't have this like year-long increase in work without any compensation change. That's where people start to get really frustrated, and we should reward them for the work that they're doing. If it's more than a couple months, it becomes their job. So that's also something we need to really take into account. And then encouraging balance, just making sure that we can be comfortable to tell our people that balance is okay. You know, setting boundaries is okay. I know most of you probably use Teams. There's a whole lot of different apps that help manage time. The Viva app, you can go on there and block focus time out, tell it to block it for you, it will do it for you. You can put, you know, different times of the day to do training, dedicate to different parts of collaboration. So encouraging balance using our digital tools, I think that's also another thing that we have in our control to be able to help our employees better manage their balance and time. And then just more specifically, some things that we've done at LifeScan to help with some of these. We actually did a meeting-free Friday. It was a pilot, but turned into, you know, basically a year long of meeting-free Fridays, and that was internal meetings. So basically we told our internal teams, you know, don't schedule meetings on Fridays unless it's super critical. For the most part, people did follow it. People really liked it. And it gave people a day to kind of get their actual work done without being on calls back to back to back. So that worked really well. We were really hesitant about doing it at first, but if done correctly and done collaboratively, it does work well. We also instituted a global day off. So the one day a year where everybody in the company is off. So there's no missing out on emails or coming back to this huge pile of emails from the day before. So it's a pretty easy way to try to help give people some extra time. And I won't go through each of these, but I also would say one of the biggest ones that I think we've done and done well is this monthly people leader meeting. I'll say it again. This is one place where all of our cross-functional leaders come in together and talk about things. And we even do things like, you know, role play. So, hey, we want to talk about how to address a disengaged employee. Okay, great. Hey, you know, manager over here in marketing, can you tell us how you've done that once? And they give an example and they help their peers out. So it creates that cross collaboration, which we really like. But if any of you see any of these that you're curious about, send me a note. I'm happy to tell you how we did it or give you some suggestions. So those are some of the things I think that have gone well for us. But again, I'm going to go back to this people leaders focus for a second. So this is where I think we should be spending a lot of our time, is just putting a focus on those people leaders, giving them the tools and resources that they need to help them manage their teams. So teaching them about importance of building strong relationships, making sure we understand that when you have that strong relationship, it's more likely that that employee is going to tell you when something's not going right, or tell you when they're looking for a new job, so that you have some time to course correct. Leverage what drives your people. So knowing what drives them and knowing what they are aiming for and what makes them tick, that's super important, because we can play to that strength and we can make sure they're engaged because we are doing that. And then this last one here, knowing what's best for versus getting the best from your people. So you might have an employee who's really, really good at their job, but you know that they don't like that job and they might want to try something else. So knowing when to advocate for what's best for them as a person versus what's best for you to get that job done. I think that's also really, really important, and knowing when that line is kind of being teetered. So, you know, I would say that's probably my biggest takeaway from this, is those people leaders, you've got to really have, you know, some solid training and solid conversation with them. But like I said, if you saw anything today that you want to know more about, or curious, want to have a discussion, I'm happy to share any of the things that we put in place at LifeScan. Happy to talk through anything with anyone. So I appreciate your time, and I am going to turn it over to Brittany for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monica, for such a great presentation. We did have quite a few questions come through, so we had to dive right in and answer a couple of those. This one question asks, what are some ways to identify quiet quitting within your team?
Ah, that's a great one. And actually, I told Brittany that should be another topic for one of these discussions. But I think, again, knowing and having those open relationships with your team, you know, you get to know your people and get to know their typical productivity output. When you start to see that change and that, you know, decrease a bit, I think you can start to really see pretty obviously when someone's not keeping up with that. I think having those clear goals and objectives too is really important, because the job description and the goals and objectives should be different, right? So what are you aiming to achieve? And if the person's not achieving, you have to be very transparent and catch that up front, because if you don't hold people accountable, they're just going to, you know, they'll continue to quiet quit because it's not being addressed. But I have actually a whole nother slide on things to look for quiet quitters that I'm happy to share as well. I can add to the deck.
Awesome. Thank you. This next question, how can we broach the subject with individuals who are meeting quotas without seeming accusatory?
It's another good one. I think that's again where we come down to having those clear goals and objectives, right? Yes, your job is to hit your quotas, but your job is also to be an engaged part of the team. And, you know, obviously there's a what and a how part of your performance. So I think it's just really having that dialogue and having that open communication on expectations. Yeah, that your job is expected, but I also need these other things as well that aren't just the things that you can check off of a box. So hopefully that helps a bit.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have time for one last question. Are there different methodologies to address quiet quitting to re-engage team members based on remote, hybrid, or fully in office?
Absolutely. So that's actually one of the things that all of us have been trying to figure out over this time. But, you know, everyone has a different view on this hybrid, remote coming into office, because honestly, we've had remote workers long before the pandemic. We just have more of them now. But even if it's trying to get your team together, once a month, once a week in person, if you have a remote team and a hybrid team or a mix of both, just trying to do that and making that extra effort to get people together. I know here it's, at least at our company here, it's a little bit tough because we have people from other countries. So we can't just say, hey, all come into Malvern or all come into Pennsylvania. So we make a really big effort to bring the people in person who are local, get on a Zoom with the people who aren't. They can bring their little cluster together and, we try to make it work. But I think that the principles are all the same. People, whether they're a remote worker or an in-office worker or a hybrid worker, they all want the same things. And, when it comes down to it, they're all human. So I think you can use the same principles and just make that extra effort to connect them together in the ways that they would like to be.
Great. Well, thank you so much again, Monica, for such an insightful keynote presentation. I also want to thank everyone who joined us today for this fantastic keynote. This session, along with all of today's content, will be made available on demand following the event. Thank you again, Monica.
Thanks, everybody.